Let's go on traveling with our guest of today, who gave up teaching philosophy in quite a few French high schools for a living elsewhere on the roads, long ones if possible. Nell Arbor, published by FAUQUEMBERG Editions. His first work is the story of an epic trip in the Australian Far West. David FAUQUEMBERG, hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us today between two adventures. You're just coming back from Argentina, aren't you?
Yes, I was in Buenos Aires.
Yes, and so before Buenos Aires, you went for this 2 years trip in the Australian Far West. Did you go there especially to write, or have you decided to write after your trip?
No, I never had the project to write the book. It's when I came back from that trip, because it was a special one. So that's the only way I found to put a bit of order in that trip. That was like beyond my control, let's say.
What do you mean it was a special one? Because you did many trips before this one, so why this one was particularly impressive?
Because it was a trip that had a special intensity. Like everything was beyond my control. I did not control anything in that trip. I was going from one point to another, from one encounter to another, and I didn't quite understood at the moment how I had got from that point to that other point. So when I came back, I was completely lost, and the only way I could find to control that trip was to try and write it.
Mm-hmm. So Nell Arbor means literally the treeless plain, and the title tells about a real barren wasteland. And on the pictures you brought, we can actually see that they don't know traffic jam there, definitely.
No.
Anyway, as you said, you met people, you met dropouts, you met drunk cowboys, you met aborigines. I know it's difficult, but which one left you the strongest memory?
Well, the strongest character of the book and the strongest memory of that trip is Augustus, who was an Aboriginal elder from an Aboriginal tribe called the Bardi people. And for me, it was quite a shock, because I discovered another way of conceiving the world, completely different conception of time, of the past, of the being melt up with the present. And it was quite a shock. An interesting character, because he had the Aboriginal identity, but at the same time he was very familiar with the Western identity. He had been a hippie in the 70s. He had been to the Vietnam War with Australia. So it was very interesting for me, because it gave me the possibility to enter a little bit, of course, but the daily life of Aboriginal people. And that was a bit tragic, but at the same time very, very strong.
How did this trip change not your life, but your vision of the world, let's say?
It changed my life. It made me write. That's the first effect on my life, and that's a strong one, because it took me 7 years then to write the story of that trip. And yeah, it changed my vision of the world, because before I was maybe conceiving the mythology of Aboriginal people or the Indians as a little bit as a superstition. And then I discovered that it was only a way to relate to the environment. And yeah, it changed my vision of the world completely.
So this trip made you write, and you were rewarded actually at the Saint-Malo Festival Étonnant Voyageurs, Amazing Travelers in English, with the Nicolas Bouvier Award. Is Nicolas Bouvier one of the traveling writers who have influenced you?
Well, of course, I had read Nicolas Bouvier before writing the book, but a long time ago, and I tried not to read him while writing the book, because obviously it's a bit overwhelming, Nicolas Bouvier. When you're a travel writer in French, I mean that's the absolute travel writer in French. It's like a Chatwin in English.
In fact, when one thinks about Australia, we think about Bruce Chatwin. So
yes,
did you walk on his path over there?
I went to Australia partly because I had read the song lines, but at the same time, I really don't have the same approach as Bruce Chatwin's about traveling, about Australia in particular. I think his books are more about it's a bit like a theory about traveling. It's not really what I try to do. What I try to do is really to tell a story, and it takes place in Australia, or it can take place in another country. But Chatwin, it's different. It's more like there's more distance between him and what he's doing, the people he's meeting. In my book, I try to be as close as possible to the reality. So, but of course, he was an influence to me because he's like travel writing is Bruce Chatwin in English. So
you describe in the book, I quote, a cautionless world where all is violence and ruin. So why, in spite of that, did you decide to go on crossing this awful world?
Well, I don't. That sentence, which takes place at the beginning of the book, is not particularly dealing with Australia. That's well, partly my vision of the world. I think it's a world of violence we are living in, and when you're traveling, you're much more vulnerable to that violence because you're facing it like physically, and that's what I'm looking for in traveling. It's to face things physically, to be close to the world. And of course, if you're close to the world, you take all the violence of the world, and that's what happened on the boat.
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have any time left to speak about this experience, so just read David FAUQUEMBERG's book, Nell Arbor. It is published by the editions Hubecker in the collection Amazing Travelers. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us, and see you tomorrow for another Culture Magazine.